There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. But right now, 2 more years go by. And Joseph, he's 30 years old now. In 4 years, he would have spent half of his life in Egypt. And this life that he had in Canaan, in his father Jacob's house, well, that would have become a faded, distant memory. And he probably identifies himself more as being an Egyptian slave than he ever does as being a Semitic shepherd. And he has no plan for his life, and he has no agenda for his future, besides serving his God where he's placed. And then one day, out of nowhere, a group of people rush into the prison and they say, Pharaoh needs you, and he needs you right now because Pharaoh's troubled. And when Pharaoh's troubled, all of Egypt is troubled, and it's all about a dream. And so now that butler remembers Joseph, the dream teller. So Joseph, he's washed and he's shaved. He has no beard now and he has no hair. He has a total Uncle Fester, because that's how the Egyptians like to look. They like to look all smooth looking. So I picture Joseph, he's coming in there and he's all pasty white and skinny from being in prison. He hasn't seen the sun for a long time. He probably has like a few nicks on the top of his head from shaving. And they're rushing him in to see the Pharaoh, and he's tucking in this robe that's way too big for him. And they place him right in front of the Pharaoh himself. And then he sees that butler that he saw in prison, that he served there, and he's probably like this waving. And then Potiphar's probably there for security. And then the Pharaoh himself, he speaks to Joseph and he tells him that he had a dream and that no one can interpret it. And so here it is. Here's Joseph's big chance to promote himself and to tell Pharaoh how great he really is. He's the dream interpreter, but he doesn't do that at all. Joseph, he's humble. And he takes no credit for interpreting dreams. He gives the credit to whom it belongs, to God alone. Because Joseph is very careful not to touch God's glory and to make himself out to be someone great, because he's just a man. He's just like us. And Joseph says, the power of interpreting dreams, it's not in me, but God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And so although Joseph is humble, he's very confident in God's interpretation for Pharaoh. And he already knows that God will give Pharaoh an answer for peace before he's ever told the dream. And so Pharaoh, he repeats his 2 dreams to Joseph, and Joseph listens and he doesn't interrupt. And when the Pharaoh finishes, he already knows the interpretations. And you can imagine, when Pharaoh, he had his own magicians and he had his own dream team, standing around trying to interpret the dreams. They'd be like, well, maybe the fat cow eating the skinny cows. Well, maybe we shouldn't be eating so much more beef. We should be eating more chicken. It was like a Chick-fil-A commercial. Or maybe it was like, oh, that fat cow? Well, that's Trump. He's the fat cow. That's a Trump economy. And that ugly, gaunt, lean cow? Well, that's Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats, and they're eating it all up. Or you can turn it the other way around, because we're not political here. And the others are just standing around and they're saying, it means, I got nothing. You see, the Egyptians, they knew about dreams and they had books, and they find some of these books in the archaeological digs of dream interpretations from Egypt. But none of the stuff sat right with the Pharaoh. So now Pharaoh's dream, there's these 7 fat cows coming out of the Nile, ate by 7 ugly cows, and they still remained skinny after they ate them. And it's a strange dream, and it's a little bit disturbing, but it's not enough to keep the Pharaoh up. So he went back to sleep. But this is crazy dream night, and so he has a second dream. 7 heads grew on one stalk. And if you read this in some of the older King James versions, it would have said ears of corn. And that would have been a lot of ears of corn on a stalk, 7 ears of corn. But the Egyptians, they didn't have corn. And so what this is referring to is referring to wheat. It's talking about 7 heads of wheat on one stalk. And that's still pretty good because the average is 5 heads on a stalk, but you could have up to 8. And in this dream, they were replaced by 7-headed grains, which was very thin. And Joseph, he had 3 important insights into these dreams. And the first one is that it wasn't 2 dreams. This was only 1 dream. And the second insight he had was that this dream is from the true God. And the third insight he had was that it's been revealed to Pharaoh what God's going to do. And the dream was given to you twice because this is a sure thing and it's going to come to pass. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And it's going to be so bad that nobody's going to remember those good years. And this is going to happen right away. So now Joseph, he gets bold and he goes beyond the interpretation of the dream. And now he starts giving Pharaoh advice of what to do. And then he gives him 4 steps for preparation. And he says, well, the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to hire an administrator and to collect 1/5 of the crops. And it's believed that Egypt, up until this time, they only collected 1/10 of the crops. So now the taxes have gone up from 10% to 20%. And then he tells Pharaoh that he's going to have to put officers throughout the land to be able to collect these crops. But they're going to have to build the storehouses and place them in the cities because that's where it's going to be needed to distribute the crops. So this was an accounting and a logistics challenge. And so Pharaoh, what he does is he picks Joseph because he recognizes, and it says that God's Spirit is in him. And he can see this wisdom and ability that Joseph has. And the thing is, God has been preparing Joseph for this his whole life, though nobody would have ever seen it. But now all these things are beginning to make sense. And so Pharaoh, he gives Joseph his own signet ring, which is like his own credit card, the authority of the Pharaoh. And then he gives him new clothes and they're linen. It was Egyptian cotton. And I think it was maybe like an 800 thread count or something. And then he gives him a gold chain to wear around his neck. So now he has this gold chain and this shaved head. And so now he's walking around and he looks like Mr. T. And so he gets this new chariot, the newest models, the latest model with a lot of horsepower. And he's young. He's only 30 years old. And then he's given a new name. And it's Zaphnath Pa'ani, which means God speaks and he lives. But the Pharaoh, he still just calls him Joseph. And now Joseph, he's Pharaoh's go-to guy. And he does everything that needs to be done. And he collects so much food, it says it's immeasurable. And then he's given a wife. And she's the daughter of the priest of the city that they lived in. And that was the city of On. And the priest of On, well, he served Ra, the sun god, which centered around solar worship. And then Joseph's beautiful wife's name was Asnath, which means she who belongs to the goddess Neth. And so she was probably a looker because belonging to a goddess, she probably looked pretty good. And then he has a couple of great kids, Manasseh, which means forgetting. And here he's talking about the trials and the times that he had back in his father's house. And Joseph, he had a lot of forgetting to do because he had to forget things like the death of his mother, the rape of his sister Dinah, the murders committed by his brothers, the incest of his brother Reuben with his stepmother. And then that's not even to mention his betrayal by his brothers. And then there's the affair with Potiphar's wife. And then all these years in prison. So he had a lot to forget. And then he has a second son, and his son's name was Ephraim, which means twice fruitful. That he's saying that life has gotten to be twice as good as it should be. So here we have Joseph. He has the car, he has the money, he has the looks, he has the girl, he has the job. But all he ever had was God. And God was probably the only thing that was ever really important to him. And it's like us, his priorities had to be set right with God before he could have all the rest. And I don't think all the other stuff ever mattered to him. So even after all this, and he gains all this stuff, and he has all this position, now he's the second ruler in Egypt. His destiny hasn't come to pass yet. He hasn't come to the calling of his life. Because you see, this still has nothing to do with the two dreams that he was given. Because Joseph, in the end, he will be saving thousands of lives. He'll be saving all of Egypt, and he'll be saving all of his family from Canaan. And so let me ask you, what has God been preparing you for with all your trials? Are you serving God where you're planted? Are you serving the people that are around you, no matter what your circumstances are? Are you still waiting for your dreams to be fulfilled? But you need to realize that not all dreams are from God, because God also talks about the false prophets that are always declaring their dreams. But God, he does give dreams today. And there's a book, and it's called Dreams and Visions. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's written by a Christian pastor named Tom Doyles. And he talks about God speaking through dreams to Muslims in the Muslim world where Bibles are outlawed, and how 85% of these Muslims that are coming to Christ in these countries, they have Jesus coming to them in their dreams, and he's revealing himself to them. And he says for some of them, he comes to them for up to 30 days. And it's never Muhammad, and it's always Jesus himself. But even more powerful than dreams, God tells us in his word that his word is much more important than dreams. So no matter how you come to Jesus, if you come to Jesus by his word or you come to by dreams, the important part is that you need to come. And so it may not have seemed like God was in control of the circumstances in Joseph's life, but he was. And it may not seem like God is in control of the circumstances in our world right now, but he is. And if it seems as if God is not in control of the circumstances of your life today, you need to know that he is and that you can trust him.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.